My husband.
Yeah,
And I think
this thing, it's actually pretty neat. It'll
I'll take a second
follows
here.
you.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, just don't sneeze, then it'll go right to you.
That's great.
Sure it's not. Now turn this off. We're live streaming now, and I'm just trying to set up the camera because this should be,
Yeah.
so I think we're good to go. And this will follow people around as they speak. So we also have gallery view. So I would like to make a motion to open the July 15th, 2021 New Paltz Town Board as Police Commission.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will make Julia co-host because she needs to do anything. Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second?
Could I apologize, just one amendment that came last minute, I apologize. Item 7, the review and approval of the appointment of Officer Peace. If we could just remove that from the agenda, I'm gonna go over that in executive session.
Motion to approve the agenda as modified.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any announcements?
I do have a few. The first is I just wanted to congratulate Chris Dennehy and Step One for the opening of the Kingston office in June. On June 25th, there was a ribbon cutting ceremony, and on the new office out here in court. Chris is a huge supporter of ours in terms of our mental health in-service training, so I just wanted to say congratulations to them. We will be doing our conversation with the police on July 21st from 5:30 to 7. Pastor Jennifer Berry and the United Methodist Church are going to host this event this month. So looking forward to that. I also wanted to, just in the announcements, thank Ulster County DA Dave Clegg, his office, for procuring a substantial amount of AD materials for us for discovery purposes. Discovery has placed somewhat of a burden on us in terms of supplies for materials that we need to record recording media for, whether it be reports, videos, photos, for discovery requests. And so DA Clegg's office was able to provide some of that to us. And, I just wanted to thank them. They had, I know on the county level, you're probably aware, there was a resolution to move forward with the discovery team. So I was asked to speak on behalf of that, and so I'm happy that resolution passed. They're moving to create a discovery team for the county ADAs, because I think that they are definitely inundated with the work that they have to do before. So I just want to thank the DA's office. And then finally, our registration is open for our Citizens Police Academy. We're going to run that September 8th through October 27th. Anybody that's interested can check out the information on our website, and then there's an email address that you can use if you have any questions. It's citizensacademy@newpulseny.org. And if you're interested, fill out an application, send it in. So, and that's it for this.
All right, I'd like to open public input. If anyone has any comments, if not, we will move on. And I'd like to make a motion to move into executive session to discuss personnel. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
And
Aye.
you could call my phone and you could FaceTime and you could be on the video. But we're going to leave this setup here, so we're going to go into executive session in the other room. And we'll be right back.
Would it be easier for you if I just left? Can you stay where you are?
No, because we're filming, and I think by the time I shut everything down and turn it back on, it's gonna,
Okay.
I'll make a mistake. Yeah, no, it's, I think it's working. to make a motion to come out of executive session and no action is being taken.
Second. Aye.
And so I will hand it over to you. Item number 3 is review recommendations of the NPP RRC body and car cameras.
So there, tonight we have 2 recommendations to review. The first is the recommendation that body and car cameras should be always running unless there is a specific reason for turning them off. This was not something that we had discussed or that was discussed with me during the review and review process. I understand the thought behind it, but I don't agree with that recommendation. I think there are a number of reasons for me why I would not want to have us move in that direction. The first is just changing the work environment for the officers, including myself. I mean, I wear a body camera, so in essence, this camera would be running 24/7 for me.
It's running right now?
No, it just means it's on. So I think it'll have a red light if I'm recording. But I think that would certainly we would have to that would be a negotiated thing. It changes the work environment, so that would be something that would have to be collectively bargained. Number one, but I just think it also makes for just a very difficult working environment. You're talking about privacy of the individual officers and the members. The idea that my cameras are recording when I'm talking to my wife and she's yelling at me on the phone, or my kids, or whatever. There are people that we speak to who don't want how we may be speaking to people related to an incident that or just coming up to us and saying hello. You don't want to be recorded. So I think there are definitely privacy issues and concerns, and all of that would be subject to FOIL. I do think that a policy like that would be very deleterious to the morale of the department. I do believe that our people are vested in this program. I believe that they look at these cameras as protection. We have not had incidences where officers are not active. We've had a couple instances where they have been knocked off and whatnot and struggles, but nothing where we haven't been able to capture that. And I think if that situation ever arises, then that's subject to discipline for the policy. But I don't think that we should be recording, and that doesn't even touch upon the financial impact of this. The costs for storage alone are astronomical. I have one of the items on our agenda tonight is $6,000 for the camera system as is. We've already exceeded what we thought we would need, and we want to be able to use our seized asset funds for just this one-time purchase. But then moving forward, everything's going to be in my 2022 budget. We're estimating right now, just to back up the camera data that we have, $14,500 a year just for that right now. If we were to go 24/7, I spoke with our IT. They estimate that we require potentially 2 additional servers at the cost of anywhere from $50,000 to $60,000, and honestly, no idea as to what the backup costs would be. It could be 10 times what we're paying right now a year, but you would have no idea until you see the kind of data we are recording. At this point, as of May 17th of this year, we were at 8.5 terabytes of data. The part is we require the purchase of 6 more body cameras, because the way it works now is when you're done with a shift, you take that camera, you put it on the dock, and the camera downloads the video while it's sitting there and you charge it. If you're recording 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or if you're recording the full 8 hours of your shift, the majority of it, that's going to be a longer downtime on the download. So we need more cameras so that we can circulate them more. Not to mention the wear and tear on battery and everything else.
When we were putting the policy together, I read a bunch of other policies, read a bunch of papers, best practices, and none of them said 24/7. In fact, they all said you have to have repercussions for if officers turn it off when they shouldn't, because that's a red flag. But they said it actually is not good to have it 24/7 for a lot of the reasons that you pointed out, because, there's domestic violence, there's, there are children, there are lots of different reasons why people may not want to be recorded.
I think we did a really good job, I didn't interrupt you, really good job when we did come up with this policy to consider that as well. And if I recall, we spent a pretty considerable amount of time on it. That was not something that was proposed and passed in one or even two meetings.
No, we have the discussion, and I'm not aware of any local agency in the area that is recording 24/7. I'm not really aware of any agency that's doing that on a 24/7 basis. And for those reasons. The only thing just to add in terms of what we're doing, every supervisor is tasked with reviewing at least 2 body camera videos a week. We have, they're tasked with reviewing the video to make sure policies and practices are being followed. So for example, on a vehicle and traffic stop, are the officers, introducing themselves? Are they explaining the reason for the traffic stop? Are they providing a business card if no summons is issued? And those are the things that the sergeants do, and then they make notes, and if they identify issues where instances where officers are not doing that, then they speak with those officers, and that's all documented. The review is documented, the counseling is documented, and we move forward from there. That's just kind of my thoughts on that recommendation. If you had any other questions.
So right now, the officers turn on the body cam the minute they start their shift and turn it off when they're done?
No, right now, you check out a body camera like I have here, and then if I was to be going to a call for service, then I hit my body camera and I turn it on. And my camera stays on for that call for service. Now, depending upon the nature of that call for service, I may turn it off. So for example, if I'm responding to a reported assault and it becomes evident that when I get there and I arrive and I'm speaking, that this is a sexual assault and I'm talking to the victim of a sexual assault, we turn that camera off. If I'm speaking with a juvenile in some way, for any type of case, I'm going to turn that off. And then the officers are going to document the reason for that being turned off, because those are just 2 that you would not want to have. In terms of the domestic situation, if we respond to a residence and these cameras are actually inhibiting our ability to de-escalate that situation. People are like, I don't want you having that camera in my house or whatever. We leave that discretion up to the officer. And what we've said is, if you need to turn it off in order to do your job, you be more effective in that, do that. But as soon as you feel, or if you want to keep it on, you keep it. That there is some discretion in that. As I said, I think there's a comprehensive list of when they have. Really, any law enforcement action, you have it. You have it on. The only thing we don't, in terms of what we do, is a foot patrol. If you're on foot patrol, you don't have it unless you're now beginning to engage in a call for service of some sort, or if you need it. And that's the other part. If the officer feels that the situation they just happen to walk into is potentially could have some blowback, they're gonna report that, and that's what they have been doing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
The next recommendation was for that commendations are regularly shared with the commission, and going forward, complaints will be shared as a matter of course as well. This is something that the committee discussed, identified, and we are doing. Knock on wood or my head, we haven't had any complaints yet, so that's why we haven't really had anything to announce, which I'm very happy about.
Yeah.
But we would announce really just the complaint, and that's it. When we talk, like we do the accommodations.
Yep.
And we'll also list that in the annual report, which is, we did list that in our annual report this year. So in the report that's on our website, complaints are listed, and the nature and the type and how the adjudication of that, but we'll announce it and list it this year.
Oh, sounds good.
And then I don't know if you want to go on to the next item.
Yeah, sure.
So the next item was to review and discuss the revisions to policy 47.1, the enforcement of traffic violations. So this policy was revised to incorporate MPVD policies 125, which are in-car recording system, our 134 body worn camera and the right to know policy. Those policies, they all, we wanted to make sure that updated this policy and revised it. A couple of the notes, for example, under purposes, we made sure that, we added the note that, the notation that, documentation of the interaction. Prior to that, as I said, the data recommendation, we hadn't done that, but, we are doing that as well. And then, as I said, there are references to the policies that I talk about. It talks about in-car camera, the right to know. We even give an example of how we would like the officers to introduce themselves. My name is Robert Casing, New Falls Police Department. The reason I stopped you is you drive 55 in a 35-mile-an-hour speed zone. Can I see your driver's license, registration, and insurance card? Making them aware. And then should that encounter not result in the issuance of the summons, then we would provide our business card in lieu of that. And as I say, the documenting the traffic stops is new in terms of just making sure that they create the incident and that the officers, upon completion, the officers will create an incident supplemental report containing the reason for the traffic stop, the name of the operator, their gender, race, and any actions that may have been taken that maybe have resulted. So I don't know if there's any questions. Those are really the only revisions to that particular policy.
That seemed like good revisions, good additions, just kind of summarizing, tying things together, make sure they're not overlooked. So, thanks.
Appreciate you going through all of that, actually.
Yes, the next one, number 6, is the referral to the town board to approve the expenditure of $6,000 to purchase backup storage for in-car and body-worn camera video using seized asset funds. So make a motion to refer to the town board. Second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And to the monthly report.
So in terms of the monthly report, just on as far as on-duty injuries, the one member who was injured back in February is back to work. Came back on July 1st, so that was
Yeah, that's great.
So that's all I have for commendations. If, in terms of defensive action, I've got a couple on here. I think we have 3 defensive actions. Yep. The first is, was from May. I referred to this last month briefly. In this particular case, this is one of 2 defensive actions that we have. This was a mental health arrest that eventually resulted in criminal mischief charges being lodged against the individual. In this particular case, the individual is a 52-year-old white male, 5'9", approximately 150 pounds, non-Hispanic. Officers responded to a reportedly disorderly patron and at Bacchus Bar when they responded there to speak with this individual. At some point in time during their conversation, he was making verbal threats to a trooper who also had responded. He attempted to strike the trooper. And at that point, the officer used an arm bar to physically direct this individual to the ground, where he was placed in cuffs and then arrested and processed. Or actually, not arrested, taken into custody and then transported to the hospital on a mental health evaluation. The sheriff's office also assisted in this particular case and escorted the ambulance to the hospital with the individual on a mental health evaluation, and then the charges were subsequently filed against that. If there's any questions on that one. Okay. The next is for an incident that occurred on June 24th. There are 2 reports for this particular incident, both physical direction. In this particular case, the individual is a 20-year-old female, approximately 5'7", 25 pounds, medium build, white. This was a mental health call. This individual, we had received a call for an individual who was in the middle of Main Street, stopped traffic, yelling and screaming. Officers, this went over the course of maybe about 40, 45 minutes trying to engage this individual and get them help. And then ultimately needed to secure this individual for transport to the hospital. So in this particular case, they used physical direction to control the individual, place them in cuffs, and then they were turned over to the rescue squad for transport to the hospital for mental health evaluation. I don't know if there's any questions about either of those. So the last incident, there are 4 reports, and as you will see in all of these reports, 3 of these reports were to document the officers taking out their pepper spray that we responded to on the, I think it was the June 27th. We responded to a large disturbance downtown, and I would say anywhere from 150 to 200 people fighting up and down Plattekill Avenue and Main Street. So we have, in this particular case, 3 defensive action reports that were filed by members who unholstered their pepper spray and threatened to deploy the pepper spray at the public for not, for fighting and not dispersing. And then we have one where one officer actually deployed and used the pepper spray. The individual who they sprayed was engaged in a physical altercation, wouldn't comply. When the officer went to go up, they turned around. The officer dispersed one shot from the pepper spray. The individual ended up taking off and running, and the officer was not in a position to pursue because we were still dealing with the situation on the street. What I would like to say, this was a prolonged incident. The officers encountered groups who were committing whether disorderly conduct, harassment, obstruction, physically, pushing our officers in circumstances, physically, challenging them to a physical altercation.
I watched the body cam footage. It's crazy. I encourage you to watch it.
What excited
The
them?
officers kept their calm, despite being provoked, like incredibly. It was one of the first nights all the COVID restrictions were lifted.
Oh.
Interesting.
So we,
It was madness.
yeah, this went on over the course of about 45 to 60 minutes. And, you know, these are subjects who are actively fighting. And they posed, you know, threatening officers and the public. You know, would not comply with verbal direction. And if they did, it was, you know, momentarily. It was, you know, running, you know, stopping fight to fight. And like I said, this went over the course of an hour. And, you know, I'm extremely proud of the officers and the way they handled the situation there. You know, the restraint, the video is disturbing to say the least. And, you know, really, this kind of segues into, you know, the most recent incident. You know, we're seeing a trend here. In the last 2 weeks, we've had 5 incidences where our officers have been, you know, physically confronted and or challenged and or assaulted and harassed. You know, we had 2 officers at least 2 that I saw in the video here, who were pushed in, you know, in this particular incident. We had an incident a week or so later where we had an officer who was on foot patrol on Main Street, and an individual who we, you know, had prior dealings with was following the officer, challenging them to a physical confrontation, threatening them. Officer would walk away, move to another corner. The individual continued to follow and pursue to the point that the sergeant said, you know, enough's enough, we're going to arrest him. They did. They charged him with harassment, and they arraigned him. And unheard of in my 28 years, the judge issued a temporary order of protection against the individual for the officer. So, you know, we had that. And then just a couple of nights ago, we had an individual that was being taken into custody, fought with the officers, grabbed one officer in the groin, punched him in the face, and then spit in the face of another police officer. So, you know, it is a disturbing trend that we're seeing. And you know, it's-
I'm sorry to hear that. That's disturbing.
Me too.
That's it. I was going to, we're going to talk about the police. We have a presentation that I'd like to get to, and so we'll talk about item on the agenda during the town board meeting as well.
Okay.
And so that's all we have for the police commission.
the commission review.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the police commission meeting, town board's police commission meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for all that. We
Nice
really
seeing you in
appreciate it.
Nice seeing you all. It's
Yeah,
great to have
I
you.
know, it is nice.
And so we're going to start the town board meeting. If you want to set up your computer, we'll be taking public comment. But so what we're going to do for presentations, what we find works better is that so public comment can be there because last time people couldn't really hear them. So when we have public comment, people can go to the there. But if you're Dennis and Evelyn, you're welcome to come up to the table and sit here, and you can set your computer up and log into the Zoom meeting, and then you can share your screen. And that way, we'll be able to see your presentation on the screen here, and people who are live streaming on YouTube or watching it later get a good quality presentation as well.
Is there a Wi-Fi?
Yes, the password is community.
Okay.
Now everyone knows it.
Neil, the video that's being broadcast just stopped.
Yeah, we started it again.
Yeah, it
Oh, it's back on?
yes, it should be back on now. We did have a momentary lapse on it. We probably lost like 5 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
in between.
And so I'd like to make a motion to open the town board meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Lord. United States of America.
Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With liberty and justice for all.
And I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I have no announcements.
Aye.
I just wanted to announce that, thanks to Chris and the Postal Highway Department and to, Joey Garcia and some other wonderful New Paltz people, we have American flags up and down Main Street. And, I just thought it was really nice that our community came together and supported that.
And it's more of a thanks to Alex. She's the one who streamlined the whole process.
Thank you.
I have an announcement if I could.
Yes.
Thank you.
Tomorrow, North Ohio will be closed for traffic between Van Alsten Road and Horse Road grinding. It'll be open for emergency traffic and residents, but no through traffic. Should be a one-day process. We're hoping, depending on the rain, we'll be open again probably after 4.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Great, thanks. And with that, I'd like to, if anyone has any public comments, please come up to the lectern and at 3 minutes, I will ask you to wrap it up and, pardon?
Edgar Rodriguez, resident of New Paltz. Just 2 points. One is that at the village board meeting yesterday, I made a comment suggesting regarding the police reform, the police commission, that there should be some type of representation from the village to the police commission. I'm not emphasizing the village board, but that it somehow should be a citizen that's from the village of New Paltz that presents and works with the police commission regarding the village. Because when we examine the encounters and arrests, many of them occur on Main Street, occur in the village. So I would think that it would be wise to have that in your consideration. Now, I was watching the meeting and it just stopped. What happened with the discussion, reinstatement of independent police commission? Did you get to that? Was that addressed or resolved? Or?
That was item 8 on the agenda.
Yeah, number 8.
We just finished the monthly report number 7, so we didn't get to number 8. We're going to talk about that during the town board meeting.
Okay, so the police commission meeting is over?
It is.
That's correct, this is the town.
This is town board meeting.
Okay, so then number 8 will be discussed during the town board meeting?
It's on the agenda for the town board meeting.
Oh, okay.
And I live in the village, just for the record, so the village has had representation on the police commission for years.
As a liaison?
No, I live in the village.
Okay, but we were thinking of someone not elected, not an elected official. It's non-elected individual, should be on the police commission.
Okay, any other comment? If not, we will, I will let you into the meeting, I think.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry, I'm not getting on, which is the network?
Um,
I'm seeing a lot of different networks here, but it's not taking.
Should we maybe turn to and be guest and commuter?
Logis?
I think so. If not, it would be a capital C. So how about I make while we're waiting for this, we'll do the, make a motion to, let's see, number 3 is referral to make a motion to approve the expenditure of $6,000 to purchase backup storage for in-car and body-worn camera video using seized asset funds.
I'll second that.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I think we scratched item 2, right? So I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. For a second.
Second, Alex?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so I've made you a co-host. You should be able to share your screen. I may have to move some of these settings around, but. Screen and yeah, if you share your screen, we should be able to. Great. Wow, getting good at this. There you go.
Hey.
I may not have to go through that.
All right, so I'd like to welcome you and thank you both for coming. This is Evelyn Wright, Deputy County Executive, and Dennis Doyle, the head planner for Ulster County. And so thank you very much. Sorry this has taken so long, but.
Thanks so much for having us. We're really glad to be here tonight. Really appreciate it. So I will tell you tonight about the county's housing action plan. This is a study and a plan that we spent a good chunk of last year during the pandemic working on, finished it up in February, I think, and have been going from municipality to municipality talking about it. So real happy to be here. So, when we started on this last spring, and we were talking about this on the executive team and in legislative committee, right before and right as the pandemic was breaking out, and really, looking at the housing crisis as it stood then, and some debate about should we do a study or do we know there's a crisis and we should just jump into action. And we kind of decided to do both. We decided we should take the best expeditious look we could at the available data and also take action at the same time. And so we started in on the housing action plan to gather the data, take a look at it, but really move quickly to trying to understand what's influencing our housing supply, how do we get where we are, and most importantly, to identify strategies to increase our housing supply. Really with the goal of kicking off a committee-wide conversation all across the county about how we can work together to address our housing crisis. At the same time, we also started working on the project to create new housing on the site of the old jail on Golden Hill. So it was kind of a two-pronged, study plus action approach. And I want to just really acknowledge the really fantastic work of our 9-member Housing Advisory Committee. We had folks from across the county and really across the economy. They sat down with Dennis and myself and a great team from Pattern for Progress once a month for about 7 months and really dug through all the data with us and had some really great suggestions and analysis. So some of the things that we learned from looking at the data, first of all, our county population is aging. That probably doesn't come as a surprise to everyone, but we realized it is really relevant to our housing situation because we have a lot of folks in the community who would like to age within their community, but not necessarily in the home that they're in now. They may want to be in something that's smaller, requires less maintenance, is more accessible, maybe is more walkable. And as long as they don't have some place to move, their home is also locked up and not freed up for perhaps a young family that it might be more appropriate for. So the senior housing issue is a key piece of our housing puzzle, both to serve that population, but also in terms of making good use of the housing stock we have. The other thing we really saw, and we were looking at census data over the period from 2010 to 2018, which was the latest data available. So kind of the period of the recovery from the last economic crisis. And over that time period, we saw that incomes in Ulster County really were stagnant or declining for almost everybody except the very top earners. And that was starker than I really expected it to be. And at the same time, of course, housing prices and rents were continuing to go up. So it was really putting the squeeze on households from both sides. To the point where, as of 2018, nearly 1/3 of homeowners in Ulster County and more than half of renters are living in homes that are unaffordable to them, where traditionally by affordable, we mean you're spending less than 30% of your income on housing costs. So anybody who's spending more than 30% is in an unaffordable home. And of course, since then, COVID has only exacerbated all of this. So this is a slide with a lot of numbers on it, but it's so stark, I like to show it to people. So what this does is it takes household incomes for 2010 and 2018 and breaks it up into what demographers call quintiles, meaning ordering the data and breaking it up into fifths. So the lowest quintile is the lowest 20% earners, the second quintile is the next 20%, and so on. And so if you compare the 2010 and 2018 lines, you can see that for everybody except that highest quintile, their incomes actually went down in real inflation-adjusted terms between 2010 and 2018, during the time period when we were supposedly recovering. And the lower your income was, the greater your percentage drop in your income. And so this has made it really, really difficult for ordinary folks in Ulster County to meet our rising housing costs. By contrast, the more you were earning, the more your incomes went up during that time. So we saw a real stretching of income inequality during that time. Meanwhile, across the county, we saw both rents and housing prices increase. And I've got the New Paltz data on here as well as the county data. So we saw rents go up more in New Paltz than in the county as a whole. They were sort of stagnant in the county as a whole, but went up more in New Paltz. While actually incomes went up a little bit for renters in New Paltz, not so in the county as a whole, but not as much as housing prices went up. And for home ownership, home sales prices, were higher over this whole period of New Paltz than in the county as a whole. The percentage increase was not as high as in the county as a whole, but and you can see that the inflation-adjusted income of homeowners, that's that top dashed line, relatively stagnant over that time period. And so if we take a look across our economy at where the jobs are, we see that our largest sectors of employment are not enough to carry the costs of housing. Our largest employment sector is the public sector. That includes not just government workers, but public school teachers, employees of the college, and so on. So their average wage is around $60,000 a year. That's not enough to afford a typical home in Ulster County. And some of our other large sectors, the wages are even lower on average. So our economy is just not geared to create the jobs to afford the homes that we have. This is a great way that Counter for Progress likes to illustrate what the dilemma is for renters. So the federal HUD, Housing and Urban Development, creates in every locality what they call the fair market rent, and that's based on an analysis of what rents are on the market. This is a couple years old again, but the fair market rent for Ulster County for a 2-bedroom, they estimated to be $1,155. Now, whenever I do this presentation, there's somebody who says, I'm an apartment for that. So again, this is out of date, but to afford even that apartment, you would need an hourly wage of more than $22 an hour. And of course, most of our renters are not making $22 an hour. The average hourly wage for a renter as of 2018 was closer to $13 an hour. And so you could only afford roughly 2/3 of the rent. Or to put that another way, earning $13 an hour, you would need to work 67 hours a week to afford a fair market rent apartment. So it's just an impossible situation. It's not just unaffordable, it's impossibly unaffordable. So there's a lot going on this slide, but I use it to illustrate that the housing challenges, while they exist across the county, are different in different parts of the county. And so I know folks can't see this super well. These two illustrate how on the left, median household income varies across the county, and on the right, the percentage of households that are what they call severely cost burdened. Those are households that are spending more than 50% of their income on housing. At that point, a household is living so close to the margin that any emergency medical expense, unexpected car repair, anything like that can just really throw the household into chaos. And so you can see that both of these really vary a great deal across the county. And what I like to point out when I'm showing this is if we look at the percentage of households that are very severely cost burdened, that percentage is highest in the village of New Paltz and the town of Gardner. But the median incomes are very different in the village of New Paltz and the town of Gardner. New Paltz being one of the lowest median household incomes and Gardner being one of the highest. So we have different factors that are driving that housing affordability. In one place, incomes primarily, and in the other place, housing costs primarily. So we do have in the Housing Action Plan a data appendix that has a snapshot of all the data for every municipality in the county. So that's available to dig into town of New Paltz specific data.
And that's up on the county's website as
well. And of course, COVID has only exacerbated all of this. This is data on home sales prices. Unfortunately, we can't get up to the minute data on rents, but every home sale transaction is recorded by the county, and so we do have that data. This is as of October 2020. You can see how the average and the median sales prices were increasing. This would look even worse, of course, if we pulled it now.
Yeah, I think it's 280 now for Ulster County, median sales price, as of April 1st. So it's gone up even more.
Yeah.
235 to 280.
So what we did after digesting this data was really trying to understand what's going on with this. Why are we seeing the housing unaffordability? On one side, we've got the income, everything that's going on structurally in our economy, the income inequality, really working on that through our economic development team and the Ulster 2040 strategic plan. So with this group of folks, we really looked at the housing cost side of things and saw that, the main driver of our rapid run up in housing costs over the last several years, partly obviously recently due to influx of folks, but really due to the fact that our supply is so constrained. So we've built very little in Ulster County over the last couple of decades, except at the very high end of the market. And so we have a real mismatch between the homes that we're building and the homes that we need. What we started calling on the committee the missing middle. So really realizing, folks have said to us, oh, you're doing an affordable housing study. And I say, no, we're doing a housing affordability study because it really is all the way across the whole market except for the very high end that things are unaffordable. Partly this is due to the high cost of development. The cost of everything has gone up. We do have limited areas where we can build in density due to infrastructure. But we also have seen growing soft costs of development with a lengthy and very uncertain approval process, and often the louder, smaller perhaps, but louder voices being opposition to new projects, even as perhaps in the community as a whole, there's support for increasing our housing supply. And I was very frustrated last summer to see this happen right around the corner from me in Kingston with a project that I thought was going to be a great transformation of a weedy, messy lot, and some of my neighbors managed to shut it down. So this is something we really started to look at in terms of, we did a really great job here in Ulster County of preventing the kind of sprawl that has happened in a lot of other places in this country, but we kind of got really, really good at not building things in that process. And so the foremost strategy that we identified to deal with this is we really just have to get out and talk to each other about this and really grapple with what's going on in the housing market and the role that housing plays, not just for individuals who are having trouble finding a home, but really the fabric of our community as a whole. And we worked closely with a housing committee in Woodstock while we were working on this. A member of the Woodstock Housing Committee was also an advisory committee, and so she was taking information back and forth. And they had done some really great outreach around housing in 2019 before the pandemic, and had been told by a number of organizations that rely on volunteers that they were being strapped for volunteers. The folks that usually volunteered with them were now working multiple jobs or had moved out of Woodstock, and so they were really seeing that impact, which I wouldn't have guessed that the housing market was having on the community as a whole. So, really starting to have these conversations and talk about this, and then moving to the municipal level to really identify are there places in our zoning that are inhibiting the building of new housing? Can we make those changes? Are there regulatory changes that we can make to increase supply around short-term rentals, for example? But really also moving from a kind of a passive stance of waiting for projects to be proposed and then having a one-off fight about that particular project, to really proactively identifying what do we need, where does it make sense to build it, what projects does the community want, and let's go out and seek developers to build the things that we want, where we want it. Another strategy that we looked at is what they call scattered site redevelopment. And this is something we saw on the ground up in Schenectady, a project that we were touring while we were doing the Golden Hill RFQ process, where a nonprofit organization had worked with the city and the land bank to put together 30-some different parcels for redevelopment, and had been able to go out and get low-income housing tax credits for this agglomeration of parcels, rather than just building one giant structure. And they had one street that we were on, this little side street in Schenectady, that had, you know, housing stock that would look very normal in Kingston or some of our older communities. And they had rehabbed some homes, they had some vacant lots and some homes that needed to be torn down, and they had built new structures that matched the character of the neighborhood, but purpose-built as 3 and 4 unit rental homes. And so it was just really an impressive approach that I had not considered before we saw it in action, a way to increase supply in a way that really fits into the existing neighborhood. We also talked about ways to streamline the approval process. One strategy we talked about is creating municipal term sheets where the community says, you know, this is how to get through the approval process in this community. This is what is allowed, this is what's not allowed. If you follow these steps, you can be confident your project will be approved, just to really guide developers through the process. And finally, you know, we've been talking about the general housing market this whole time, but we also desperately need an increase in the supply of supportive and transitional housing for folks dealing with mental health and substance abuse issues, for folks, you know, coming out of a homelessness crisis, things of that nature. So that's another important piece of the housing puzzle that we really need to work on. So, we along with Pattern took all of these recommendations and are working on creating what we're calling the Housing Smart Communities Program. And it's kind of loosely modeled on the state's Climate Smart Communities Program, which I know you all are familiar with, but a similar approach of a menu of actions that communities can adopt, with some guidance that we're working on in terms of model language and model regulations and kind of a resource toolkit where municipalities can then each choose from that menu which are the actions that are right for us, adapt the model language that we have, and we'll create some kind of a certification program that will then allow municipalities to access county funds for projects that they care about, like the Climate Smart program. So we're in the midst of working to get that set up, hoping to launch that later this year. And one of the keystone actions in that is going to be creating a municipal housing action plan, which will involve, you know, first of all, really engaging the community to take a look at what is our housing situation, what are our needs, looking at the menu of actions in the Housing Smart Communities Program and saying which of these are right for us to take, but also starting that proactive process of saying, where do we have sites that it makes sense to build housing? How can we put out an RFQ to find a developer to build things that we want to see happen on that site? And above all, I think we're just really encouraging municipal leaders as well as folks in the business community, nonprofit organizations, everybody to really engage our communities around the urgent need to tackle this crisis. And, you know, I feel like it gets more severe with every month that goes by. Even since we released this in February, it feels different. So Yeah, told you about this. We'll have more information about it. So this is all up, as Dennis said, on the county's website and the planning department. And, you know, Dennis and I are available to talk about any of these strategies, about sites that you have, projects that you're thinking about. We're doing a lot of those kinds of things.
You know, we in the town, we have for years talked about potentially redoing our master plan, and for a number of reasons, we have not done that. We've opted instead to kind of do specific areas of our community to reevaluate the zoning. I imagine that a number of communities in Ulster County have had that same kind of struggle with cost to benefit to change their zoning, especially when it comes to incentivizing certain housing proposals as well. Is the county looking at all at potentially, essentially the way I think like the Association of Towns would do, or even NISAC have draft kind of zoning for municipalities to kind of aid in that process and incentivize housing?
Yes, the short answer is yes. And there's some specific stuff that we've already worked on. Accessory dwelling units would be one of the ones that we've already looked at, as well as short-term rental statutes. We've looked at that, but the housing action plan that I'm sitting with my back, but I shouldn't do that. I apologize.
Well, they can see you when you talk. So if we unshare your screen, we can, we'll all just be on camera again.
But the housing action plan that everyone spoke about and that we're talking about is we're looking at the availability of funding from the ARP money, the American Recovery Plan money, to essentially be able to take the community through a housing action plan, which we would hope would end up happening, being adopted as an element of the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
And then from there, working on the changes to the zoning statute and working collaboratively, I have to emphasize that I think the discussion in the past has been sort of the housing people talking at the elected officials, the open space people talking about at the elected officials, the economic development people. So what we want to try to do is create that chorus of voices that essentially talk about housing in a way that benefits both open space, economic development, and housing at the same time. And we're firm believers, at least at the county planning department, we're firm believers that housing is a component of open space, it's a component of economic development, and it's a component of quality of life and workforce from an economic standpoint. And getting that right, I think, gets a lot of other things right.
I think you're right. Great, very nice presentation. I think it's safe to say that our board supports this and that we want to be part of this going forward. We've been talking about these issues for years, but you know, I think your presentation lays it out. There's affordable housing and then there's affordability. And I think the last year has made that clear to everyone. And a lot of the affordability is really about, you know, supply. And we, I think in the past we've always been worried about sprawl. And so like you said, we did a great job with that. We need to improve the process. And what I like about this approach is it's like you mentioned, the climate smart communities, or NYSERDA, you know, you have model laws that it's very, you know, make it easy for us to do the right thing. If you give us the right language, it's easier for us to do, but I think it's also easier for the developers if there's some uniformity among different towns, then they're not relearning the process every single time. You know, like the solar laws are a good example where, you know, it was the same, right? And it made it easier for people to put solar panels on their houses. And I think it's also like, you know, we'd like to think we're all special and that every town is unique, but you know, and one size doesn't fit all, but I think you can get, you know, some pretty generic sizes that will fit most of us, like, you know, medium, you know, and we don't need.
It's not so much the where, it's more the how, in my mind. And if we can convince the how, which is basically moving away from the multiple approvals to get to yes. So getting to more as of right use. Not that it requires, you know, the town board to establish the zone that floats, the planning board to review the density that's appropriate for the town board, and then you go through the special use permit process, and then you run the neighborhood gauntlet in terms of all those processes. And if we could change that the dynamic of how, particularly if the community identifies spaces where it wants to have development, then I think we've come a long way. And also, I think if we can change the dynamic of the discussion. And the dynamic of the discussion now has generally been neighborhood against developer. And what we really want to try to do is change the dynamic of discussion where it's neighborhood for working for an appropriate context development. And that I think it changes the political document, which is always difficult. And it changes, I think it changes the dynamic of the approval to the extent that the neighborhood thinks that it's getting something. It understands the importance of what we're adding to it. And I just want to add something, because I think if you look at the work that's been done in the town and the village, sometimes zoning, if you zone things right, they will come, and the Route 32 corridor is an absolute amazing example of that in the village.
Yep.
And the vision that the village had to do that rezoning and see it through for the approval process. And then the work that you're doing out on the thruway interchange, that rezoning out on the thruway interchange offers that. And I think that getting the zoning right, and then coupled with the idea of actually asking people to come, I think is, particularly on the housing side, I think is a sea change in terms of what we've seen in the past.
I totally agree with you. I think, first, thank you so much for the presentation. It was very illuminating, especially the seniors. I had not really thought that into the whole problem of having housing. Even I work in an organization where most of my members are over 75, so I see that happening every day. But I think that streamlining the possibility of newer development so that people aren't psychologically afraid of coming to New Paltz to build something, because they say, oh no, you're gonna have to go through so many hoops to build anything there, you're not gonna want to do it, it'll take 10 years before that building gets realized. I'm a big believer in expediency. If you have a good idea, you want it done, get it done. And it's really, really to have that mentality in this area and really try to create something that's good for the community. This morning, I was just reading about the Small Building Participation Loan Program that the Homes and Community Renewal is doing, that really gives loans for buildings between, I think it's like 5 and 40 units, that are very, very low percentage that is an incentivizer to try to create these medium housing units you were talking about. A lot of people don't know about that, being able to have assistance to be able to build these areas. But I think here in New Paltz, there's always a cross interest. It's becoming a wealthier and wealthier town because we're having the influx of so many people from the city. And yet, as the businesses develop, there's nobody for the people who work here to live. The young people, the young students that I hire to work for me because they will work for a nonprofit for a median wage, have nowhere to live. So, what can we do to incentivize and to change our philosophy of building for that income? It also really creates a problem when we are trying to open ourselves up to welcoming people of color or the Latino community. I worked a long time in Poughkeepsie, and it's just impossible for those communities to live here. And even now, let alone the people who run the town to be able to own houses and be able to live here. So these are all really timely and super important things for us to think about going into the future of the kids.
Everyone talked about, teachers not being able to afford, but it's your own highway workers, it's your own nurses. We learned a term during the pandemic called essential workers. And if you ran the numbers for essential workers with respect to affordability, you would find that's the people we're pricing in. And we call them essential workers. And that's the message that has to get across.
Right.
I also would say that the town and the village has something very unique in Ulster County in terms of what we've done with respect to inclusionary zoning, which is a portion of every project over a certain size has to have a certain number of affordable units, and you've been enforcing that.
Well, the village has that, right? And we've been trying to do something like that in the town, and what we keep running into is that we have a different type of development. It's more like houses. And so we need to figure out, some sort of incentive zone.
I can tell you that if I ask you a question, are you willing to sacrifice wetlands so that we can have development? The answer you would get from the environmental community is absolutely not,
Yes.
right? The answer you should get from the housing developer is absolutely you're gonna provide affordable housing. It is that imperative. And I think that's what you have to lay down in terms of whether it's stretch building codes, whether it's environmental protection, whether it's open space, you have to lay down that imperative that it's inclusionary. And there are ways to do it. The example I would give you is if you can't build a house and make it affordable, require an accessory dwelling unit, and that's affordable. You know, those are the types of things. You went to a second story on a habitable second story on your business zones. That's the kind of thing you can do for residential development as well. You know,
We're interested in doing it, and we're interested in the county has ideas. I think the board is, we want to be part of this. And so we look forward to working with you guys.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, so one thing I wanted to add is I think some people are going to be worried about this. They think that we're just going to we're removing all the rules, right? And we're welcoming developers in. I look at it as the opposite. Actually, we're giving them a better path so it's easier for them to get there instead of, I think one approach could be, I lived in New Hampshire for a while, right? It was just like live free or die. There were no rules. And then you get that type of development, right?
What I would say is, I think it was early this year, we did a presentation by an engineering firm, and it was literally about what does density mean, and we went through a series of how to establish density, and we went through a number of photos about what do you like best. There was something like 60 or 70 dependents, and we were actually, you could actually vote on an app, so you had an instant return. The denser pictures got the most votes. Yeah, where you could show subdivisions that look like single family houses, but they were essentially two family houses, where you could show infill development that essentially looked like the other development around it, as compared to what you're seeing in many instances, which are 3-acre lots with a house in the middle of it that blocks you through the shopping. So, and I'd be willing, I'd be willing to do that presentation if somebody has it.
Yeah, I was in that. It was a great presentation.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, that was great. It was a really good presentation.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
We'll be in touch.
Excellent. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Given that the chief is here, I assume he's looking for us to do the related to the police commission. Do you want to leave that on up on the agenda?
You can do that now.
Yeah, I think that would make sense.
You're sticking around for. I know we need to do this. Oh,
Yeah, all right, cool. Either way, I think it's fun. We can move that up.
yeah. So, yeah, I'm happy to do that. That past week, if you want to come to the table, you're more welcome to come to the table. So I sent the document around. I sent it to the chief, and I sent it to the town board members. I hope everyone got it, right? And so, kind of the idea behind that was, the committee to reform and reinvent the police gave us some recommendations for what they wanted, and then they gave us a bunch of links to a bunch of different papers. And so there was a lot of information there, and then we contacted the Association of Towns to give some examples, and they gave us some guidance what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. And so what I tried to do is just summarize all of that. I put it all in one place because I was frustrated that I was going from one paper to the other paper to the other paper, and I was like, okay, now I forgot what I read 10 minutes ago. And so I tried to put all that together. Then I went into the E-Code 360, and I looked up all of the different towns in the state of New York that have citizen police commissions. I think there's maybe 4 or 5. And then cities that have or advisory boards. And so I and I went through and I listed their duties and responsibilities. And in the end, when I kind of read them all, I think the one that we had in New Paltz kind of fit a lot of what the Reform and Reinvention Committee wanted. The 3 different papers that they suggested. Basically, the papers kind of summarize the different types. There's the oversight board, there's the accountability board. A lot of them came up with like the one they recommended a hybrid board. So a board that some of the work was done by the police, and that kind of helps with the so-called blue wall. That oftentimes police doing an internal investigation can get a lot further than non-police doing the investigation. But then that is then reviewed by citizens. And that's kind of what we had with the police commission. And so, I kind of went back and reread what we had with the old law. And I was like, well, why don't we just repass the old law that we had? And so I wanted to discuss with the board what they thought of that. That seemed to work for a long time. And it would be the fastest, most expedient thing to do as well. We could have Joe, reheat it, basically. And we could probably have that law passed by end of August. And we could have, citizens running the police commission. So I wanted to bring it up with the board and see what people thought, So.
Well, I read that we sort of looked like it contained a large amount of what was put to the table this time. So many of the same concepts and the same idea, where you have the community making the decisions, looking at everything from their perspective, and I like the expediency of it. The fact that we don't have to rehash this again for months and months and months, and yet they have that oversight. So I'm with it.
When the town board assumed the role as the police commission, that was in its own right controversial at the time. And I spent some time at the Elting Library kind of reading on the history of the Falls Police Commission. And a lot of the conversations we're having today have been had for decades, actually. And I bring that up not to rehash those arguments, but just note that the New Paltz Police Commission has had multiple different forms. At one point, I think it was like a 3-member board. There were paid commissions. There was a whole bunch of controversies, no different than we have today. And ultimately, they settled on the law that we have / had. It's still on our E-code, but it's obviously not operated by citizens for a reason. After having tried a number of different ones, and at the time, I know you have done this as well, but I have too, even just kind of reviewed our local police commissions as well within Ulster County. And I would say if I were to compare ours as it stood prior to us assuming that role to theirs, I actually think relative to people wanting to see citizen engagement, ours without a doubt was by far the more progressive version of that. So I'm actually very much in favor of taking that step and going the route of redoing the original law, knowing it's not perfect, but I think that it accomplishes a lot of what I think we've heard a lot of our residents talk about as well too. My only that I'm still a little confused why we have to do another public hearing for that law, especially since it's something that's already been adopted previously that had a public hearing that we've still maintained just us assuming the role. But if that's what our legal counsel thinks we need to do, then that's what I think we should do.
Yeah, that's what we're told.
Yeah.
So, but what we will do is if the board is okay with it, we will, I'll ask Joe to write up the paperwork that we need. Hopefully we'll have that at our next meeting. Mm-hmm. And once we have all the paperwork, then we can set a public hearing. Yeah. Because then people will have all the paperwork to review, and then people can make public comments on that law. Mm-hmm. And based on those public comments, then we can decide whether we move forward.
So my one question is, let's say this goes forward, it gets put into place, it's working. Will there be a 6-month or 1 year looking into how it's working? Will there be a window open for reassessment?
So it would be a local law like any local
law.
Yeah,
we can modify, just like we modified the no parking areas, right? Right. You can modify it with a public hearing and make tweaks.
The only modification that I think I would be interested in exploring is my recollection of how we work with planning board members is the dismissal of a planning board member that's been appointed by the town board would require a public hearing to do so. And as we saw in the last instance of the police commission, that was kind of just dismissed as a single move. I think it might be an interesting measure to, because the town board ultimately, whether people like it or not, does have that authority to do that. But at least say that if that's a process that the town's going to do, that it would require a public hearing to do that, to dismiss a member, should they go down that path.
Just in conversations with the reform events committee, that was definitely something that was of importance to that. Just that if the member were to be dismissed or the board was to no longer be existent, that the public reasoning of held in public.
Yeah, seems like a good way to do it.
I mean, the only thing if I may just add, I mean, in essence, this is how, going back to the old point, we've been operating like that, other than you're just all assuming both roles. You're assuming roles as police commissioners and town board members. There's no difference in terms of how we've been operating.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we had, during the police commission, we make a motion to recommend to the town board. We've been doing that for years. We don't even vote on things in the police commission meeting. We make a motion to the town board, and then like 20 minutes later, we're making the same motion.
And I think that's actually an important point just to manage expectations here. That what we're looking to do here is essentially go to the bounds of what the state constitution allows us to do to allow citizens to be involved in this process. Ultimately, the state constitution and state law requires the town board to make a number of decisions that I've heard a number of residents say they wish we did not make, but that's not our call. So what we are willing to do, happily willing to do, is stretch those bounds as far as we can, but ultimately there's no system we can come up with that will totally alleviate those roles. And I understand that a lot of times people have brought forth to us things that they do in other towns and other cities, and other states. But that's how it works in New York State, and that's the guidelines we have. And I do think that going back to what we previously had would satisfy those people. But I just want to be really candid and honest and say that that doesn't mean all the comments we've heard we're going to be able to adhere to, because we simply have limitations.
Go look at Ithaca's review board.
Yeah.
They have less power than ours does.
Yeah.
And so we usually look to Ithaca as a progressive leader. But they're bound by the same state laws as we are. So. All right.
Well, I'll just add something if I may. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you.
Great. I think I was really loud before. Is that what happened before?
You're a good volume now. Yeah.
Okay, good. I just wondered when would be the appropriate, and I want to thank Neil for, when I got this extremely long document, I was like, and you described it as a few thoughts. I thought that was funny. But I, got through it, and I really appreciate it. And it's so good to have it all laid out. And it allows us to now look at our law. And I agree that looking at our law as a starting point would be great. And the one thing I have my computer open, and I am looking at letter C in your document, Neil. And it talks about citizen review of police and approaches and its implementation. And you mentioned that it's broken into 4 types. And I just, with varying levels of citizen involvement in, for example, in investigating allegations of police misconduct. And so I just wondered, I think our law doesn't cover quite that part. Are we going to have a time when we discuss whether and how to decide on, adding some additional parts like that?
So that one, they talk about 4, if I remember right, they break it into 4 different
Right.
models.
Right, that wasn't you, that was them. I'm sorry.
They say the hybrid model is the one they recommend. And so that hybrid model is a mix of having the police do the investigation, because it gets past that blue wall that people talk about. Also, but then in the end, that investigation is then reviewed by the citizens, right? And so what they find is that if the police do the investigation and do the review, sometimes things get overlooked or the citizens don't have enough input. And so what I was saying is our current model and that former law is really that hybrid model. And part of that is limited by our police contract, right? The union contract requires
Yep.
investigation to be done by, the preliminary investigation to be done by the lieutenant. Is that right?
I think I forget what the specific in the statute is, but yeah, we conduct that. But on conversely, like when we conduct an internal investigation, a member cannot refuse to answer questions. They cannot refuse to provide a memo. If they do, then those are additional charges that they can be, that can be lodged against them. So there is no. And oftentimes you're talking about this when you speak of a use of force investigation of some sort, or when we do, if you have, let's say, for example, an officer involved shooting, you have two parallel investigations. Well, now, you may have three, but, you have two parallel investigations, a criminal investigation and a departmental investigation. And literally think of it as a wall between both. In terms of the departmental investigation, you're looking at, were those actions adherent to policy and procedure? There are things we can ask of, we can ask them a memo from the member, we can speak to them, we can interview them, and they can't refuse to answer those questions. And if they do, then they're insubordinate. Now, part of that, some of that is that what the New Jersey versus Gary, this whole Gary rule is that when the individual members, what they say though really adheres to just the departmental investigation. And then now any type of use of force should be investigated by the Attorney General's Special Investigations Unit. And then their use of subpoenas and other ways to get and elicit testimony would be done. But they're two distinct investigations. But for the internal investigation, and that's really all that a police commission would be tasked with. And the department is tasked with is investigating it from a criminal perspective. I'm sorry, from a departmental perspective.
Okay. I don't know if that helped or not.
Yeah, I don't know if I confused you more, sorry.
But, I guess what I'm saying is, like, one, we're limited by union contract, but, I think when I read through the articles, I got out of it is that we're actually doing what at least one of the articles that the committee recommended we follow, we're already doing best practices. Which is why I was like, oh, maybe our law is worth looking at. So.
Right. I'm just looking at the law and I'm trying to find where it, dovetails well with that recommendation, and maybe that we could just talk about it further after we, are sort of looking at the law really carefully.
Just in terms of a practical idea of it, Julie, what I would say is it's in essence, when we have internal investigations here and we speak, myself and Chief Schneider was here, and we would meet with you all in executive session presenting to you the information. That's really what we would, if you had empowered tomorrow a civilian police commission to take over the same way you're doing, that's what those meetings would be. It'd be at a police commission meeting, go to an executive session, you would present your investigation, all the materials involved, and they'd be able to see all that and are privy to all that. As far as, actually investigating, interviewing, things like that, that is handled by in our case, the lieutenant, who's the internal affairs investigator, received training in that, and they would be tasked with doing that. So the idea is if, we come before a police commission, there's things we don't think we're asking, then we go back and we ask those questions, and we continue to work through that until, we come to a conclusion. That's the hybrid model. We really are in a hybrid model right now, except you're acting in both the capacity as police commission and then ultimately town board.
Yep. Does that help, Julie? Are you still there?
I'm so sorry. My reception, my connection to the Wi-Fi is obviously a little spotty. So thank you. If I go out, that's just because the reception's a little bad.
Is it all right if we move on?
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. So number 5 is the water cooler proposal on contract. It's a motion billing of new water coolers as outlined in the memo from Chris Marks. This ultimately saves us some money. Thank you, Chris, Don, for solving some problems.
And my assistant Dawn and finance department really worked hard on trying to help with some of the billing issues that we're having.
Need a second?
Yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, let's see, this last one, I sent this around. This is the Memorial Bridge project. I gave the background, but basically we've been working on this for a few years. The bridge was built in the 80s. This is the bridge that connects the pool and the community center. Built in the 80s, help of the highway department. Chris was explaining it, puts footings. It has reached the end of its life, if not very soon. And so, we've written a bunch of grants. We've been unsuccessful, but we have gotten money from Senator Bonasek and Senator Metzger. That pays for more than half of it. And so we put the bids out. We got 2 bids back. So we then also have an agreement with the village where they pay for half of the capital cost project. So we still need, on top of the grant money, we still need to come up with some more money. And so, it's about probably $35,000 for this. And I wanted to have a discussion with the board. I think one idea is, we try to find that in the budget this year. If we can't, we can add that maybe to the bonding for the Henry W. project and kind of pay for it over the lifespan of the bridge.
Right.
Instead of 1 year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's a pretty good time to do that as well.
and the timing is pretty good because we'll be probably talking about that in the next couple of weeks. But so before, I wanted to have a discussion with the board because I was going to have the attorneys write up that bonding documents. And so we can just add this amount to that and change the language to include, they are kind of related. They're both, but
Yeah.
related, they're adjacent to one another.
Yeah.
I think they actually do provide some access for people who live in that community nearby to get to the Empire State Trail.
Yeah, I think that's
So, my preference is that we kind of find out what that final cost is, add it to the bonding that we've already committed ourselves to for the bike path. And it also then gets paid for over the life of the bridge.
I think that's great.
I like that idea.
And so, I've been talking to the low bid person. And, he keeps, he's like, oh, what's the deal? Are you gonna accept it or not? And so I would like to be able to tell him that we're going to accept the bid. And so my motion tonight is to authorize the supervisor to work with the town attorney to execute any and all paperwork necessary to accept the low bid for the Moriello Bridge repair project. Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Working on this one for about,
Yeah,
5
thanks, Neil. That was a good one. I've been seeing that thing fall apart. So I'm glad to hear
We've
that.
had multiple state senators
Yeah.
who passed their hope on it at this point.
yes, so I should ask the Congress.
Oh my God.
I should say, hey, you want to be part of this project? I'll send them an email tomorrow.
I'm gonna just do the wall kill.
Yeah.
That's
a whole nother kid of work.
so let's see, number 8, the next is the review of guidelines for public comment. We haven't missed anything yet.
No, it's not.
You did 7? Oh, yeah. 'Cause it was
Yeah,
6.
yeah. Yeah, I wanted to just talk about this quickly. I know we got an email and I meant to write back to the group as well. And so I just want to be clear that, there are people who think that this curtails public comment. We're actually not changing any of our public comment rules. We've always tried to hold to this, but what we're actually trying to do is standardize the process. And I put this on us. We have not been consistent in how much time we have given people or when we've responded and when we haven't responded to people. So we're trying to be better with that. And I think that this makes the most sense to do that, is just formally adopt it this way. So we have a standard process going forward, so we're not accused of playing favorites later to anyone, still providing people the opportunity to speak, still providing them the chance to speak in front of the public, but doing it in a way that we're fair and equal to anyone, and no matter what their viewpoint is, to do that.
And so, I set some ideas to the board members. I can read those if people want to hear it. So, my notes are: neither the open meetings law nor any other statute provides the public with the right to speak during meetings. However, since the town board encourages public participation, rules and procedures must be developed that are reasonable and that treat members of the public equally. To this end, the board has adopted, or will discuss, these are the proposed guidelines to ensure consistency and fairness. Each individual wishing to make public comment shall have a total of 3 minutes to present their comments. At that time, the meeting chair will ask that comment be concluded. If more time is needed, the board requests that written comments be submitted to the clerk, where they will be given to the town board members for them to finish reading at their own time. And if it's a public hearing, that's different, right? So public hearings, they go into the permanent record. Right, but so individuals may speak extemporaneously or read prepared comments. However, individuals reading comments on behalf of another are still limited to 1 3-minute comment. For example, an individual may read comments from several different people, providing that the combined length does not exceed the 3-minute limit. Letters submitted as public comment for public hearings will be entered into the minutes. Public comment is an opportunity for the board to hear public opinion. However, the board shall not engage in dialogue during public comment period. The board may, at its discretion, choose to have a board conversation regarding issues raised during the public comment period. So we may have a discussion amongst ourselves saying, wow, that's an interesting point, but we will not go back and forth and have a discussion or an argument. And it is that there's a disparity of power with us sitting here as board members and the public coming to speak with us. I don't think it's fair for us to go back.
And then decide when that conversation should end or when it should continue, which I definitely have seen go awry at a number of public meetings I've attended as well.
And so, the other thing is, just to kind of make people aware, public comment is people's opportunity to comment to the board, not to comment to the public, right? And so if you have a comment that's more than 3 minutes, send it to us. We read it. We are still hearing you. We just are hearing you in, a written form.
I think that's key. I know I read every single letter people send me. I try to answer people. I really pay so much attention to what ideas people have. And just because it isn't those 3 minutes doesn't mean that I'm not going to give them an incredible amount of attention. People come to me and say, I really want this done, or what about this? I'm like, oh, let's get it done. This is important, or share it with you guys. So I think that is incredibly important for everybody to know, that just because you didn't get all your ideas in those 3 minutes, we're here as representatives to receive any of those comments.
And I also respect people's, ability to want to have a comment that they want to share with the community at large, and that they use this forum to do that.
Yeah.
And what I would say is that if that is something that's going to go beyond that time period, there are other avenues to do that, whether that be a letter to the editor, or whether that be any social forum. And then I think relative to the idea of kind of having a broader dialogue with the board, I can just speak for myself. I don't think I've ever turned down, I had one literally just 2 days ago with a community member who, honestly, we disagreed on an issue, but had a really good conversation about it, and I thought it was productive on both ends. Like, if people or groups want to talk about something further, I've not really seen anyone say that that's not something they want to engage in. I just think there's an important distinction between having public meetings and meetings that are in public. These are meetings that are in public. Public meetings are something I think we would be willing to engage in, but that is a totally different format.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't happened much in the last year and a half or so because I've been wearing a mask and no one recognizes me. It's not great, but, you know, I've had conversations with people all the time for years. So, I mean, and the masks are coming off, and so I'm sure those conversations will be more frequent. That's just, my thoughts on that. So,
All right, so.
So we want a motion to formally
Could I say something? I just was waiting for others to finish. Is that all right if I say something?
go for it.
Alex, I think you referenced an email that we got from Ulster activists, perhaps. And I was just wanting to, you know, I read it too, and of course I read all the letters that we get. And I think, Dan, you make a very good point about there's public meetings and there's meetings that are open to the public, and that is a key thing. What I, you know, looking for just to give a little something perhaps is my idea anyways, and maybe totally the only one who's interested, but one of their requests was that it's we don't limit public comment, and I think it should be limited because, you know, that's otherwise, you know, it could be abused even, but it also just can lead to a really long meeting where, you know, it can make other issues not get their due. And so I was wondering if, I just wanted to put out there, perhaps we could just open it to 4 minutes instead of 3 minutes. That's just my thought. Like I said, it may be totally, no one else seems to want to, you know, examine it. And that's okay. I just thought I'd put it out there that if it were up to me, I think I would do that.
I think I had a really strict English teacher that said if you can't say it in 4 minutes, you can't say it in 3 minutes. Or if you can't say it in 3 minutes, you can't say it in 4 minutes.
I would also say that we have asked people to do 3 minutes for a number of years. Like, this is not a new concept, and I think it's fine that we're just simply standardizing the procedure that we already had that we didn't formalize. So I actually think it's fine to stick to the 3 minute.
But I appreciate
Which
your
is more
thoughts,
than
too.
most, I mean, I think the legislature does 2 minutes possibly, and I think they turn up their mics.
yeah,
So,
I'd like to comment.
That's fine. I've definitely been in meetings where I felt really bad that someone seemed, you know, to have a lot to say, and, you know, it always depends on the issue maybe. But that's fine. Just thought I'd put it out there. Thanks.
I like the comment. I would have written less, but I didn't have enough time.
Exactly, that's true.
So, yeah, I'm in favor of, you know, having Dan, I don't know if you.
yeah, I'm happy to move, I guess we'll just call it like the public comment policy for 2021. And I think it's something, by the way, that we should review at our reorg meetings, just like we do any kind of policy or just like we do any schedule for our boards.
Yeah.
This format doesn't work. At our reorg meeting, we should reevaluate that.
We'll put it on the reorg agenda.
Yeah. So I'd like to move the adoption of that.
I second that.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the July warrant, I'd like to make a motion to approve the July warrant in the amount of $1,484,956.27.
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, so this is a resolution to advertise for bids for construction for the town of New Paltz Phase 3 backup water supply contracts.
Second?
This resolution has been posted on the town website. Motion to pass the resolution as written.
Second?
Any discussion? We can say this is a long time coming. This started before, maybe even before you were on the board.
Yeah, actually.
But we'll see. This is just really the next step in that process. Now, we'll put the bids out. We'll see how the bids come back. Hopefully, we can do it within the budget. If not, we may have to, I had a really good conversation with Chris and Stacy yesterday. There are ways we can do alternative bidding, right? It's called
I forget the term she used.
But, you know,
They're like add-ons.
yeah, we're gonna go through and see if this works, and if it doesn't, we can redo the bidding, hopefully, and it'll come, we built a bunch of room into DEP, been working on this for a while, but hopefully this comes back within bids and we can pull it off and people have clean, safe water to drink. So all in favor?
I,
Aye? Great.
Aye.
That's it.
motion to adjourn?
Was there something on there for the asbestos inspection?
No, that was already, we already did that at the last town board meeting, I thought.
No, it was just, Kathy put it in the budget modification for the number, but no one ever approved the one. I saw it on the agenda, I thought it was there.
It's not on, unless, maybe it's on the consent agenda. Yes, on the consent agenda.
Okay, I just remember you going through the consent agenda.
Yeah, we did that, right? The consent agenda?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, well, we
We
were,
did while we were-
thanks, Chris, I appreciate that.
It did go quick,
Yeah,
not
sorry.
quick, but it did go in between the other two.
Yeah, so,
Thank you.
great, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, motion to adjourn,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Bye, Julie.
Let's see how this worked out.